What is mindset? This is a concept which is heavily abused, I would say, these days, especially in this context of personal growth and transformation. And if not deconstructed, can be at best, I'd say, useless and confusing. And personally, I made a habit of defining terms that I used to use, right, that I use frequently in my life. And mindset was a term that I came across, of course, a long time ago. It's also popularized in this book called Growth Mindset by Carl Dweck, in opposition with fixed mindset. For me, mindset is ultimately a state of mind, is a mind state, right? This mind state is the result of parsing or filtering reality through a certain set of beliefs. So there is this associated set of beliefs, which, and now I'm talking about growth mindset, let's say, this set of associated beliefs, which allows me to frame reality, to make everything appear as helpful. Einstein had this quote that the most important decision we have to make in our lives is to decide whether we live in a friendly or a hostile universe. And that, for me, is a very interesting choice of words, because he used decisions and beliefs in the same phrase, right? The most important decision we have to make is whether we believe we live in a friendly or a hostile universe. So ultimately, beliefs are decisions, right? So if beliefs are decisions, then the mindset is really the set of associated beliefs which give me the state of mind that I prefer to have in my life, which leads me to live my life as if this universe is a friendly universe, for example. What does it mean to be a friendly universe? Well, I'm egoistic and selfish in that sense, and I just assume that everything that happens to me happens for me, and it's a unique learning opportunity, and a nice lesson that I need. Even if I don't understand it right away, why do I have to learn that lesson? Or, how is this situation helpful for me? Because it looks a bit, detrimental. Let's say I'm getting delayed, or I'm stuck in traffic, or I don't know, something bad happens. I don't default anymore into believing that, oh, poor me, why do I have to go through this? Why can't this be easier? How can I get around this? How can I escape? I don't complain anymore. I don't challenge the necessity of any situation to be exactly as it is, which is proved to be incredibly helpful as a mindset, right? As a state of mind. And this is something that I had to cultivate through years and years. So this is a daily practice, okay? I'm not saying that once you decide to have this mindset, tomorrow everything will be, much nicer. It will be in time, right? But indeed, the decision is what has to happen first. Because if beliefs are decisions, ultimately it's your decision to see things like that. Does it make sense? So reality is perceived by each of us in a different, unique way, and in a subjective way. The objective reality as such is something that we don't really have access to. What we have access to is the reality as we frame it, as our brain interprets it, computes it, and understands it. right? But we actively delete, distort, and frame things in ways that are familiar to us. Because otherwise, we would always be unsafe. We will feel insecure because nothing would make sense. I would not be able to understand anything that happens to me. So we have to frame things that happen to us in our day-to-day life in a way that makes sense, based on outcomes and understandings that happened in the past, so that we can now translate also in this current event, so that in the future we can also expect similar events to happen, so that we can frame them in a similar way, and so on. This is a very important thing to understand, because ultimately, if you take ownership of what happens to you in your life, and you just decide that everything happens for you instead, and it's really like an important lesson for you to learn, then everything changes. Everything changes dramatically, even, I would say, because you loosen up the grip on things, right? From having to always fight for another day, fight with people who you think you are in a competition all the time, prove yourself towards others, um, prove yourself to yourself, right? All the time, like fight with yourself, fight with others. This is really not the best way to live, in my opinion. Having a friendly relationship, at least to yourself, trusting yourself, knowing deeply that everything that happens to you is uh, not forceful, but a graceful opportunity for you to improve yourself by you assessing the situation in a non-confrontational way, by understanding that things can be approached with a lighter state of mind, without having to always be so heavily involved and angry and very passionate and emotional about things. There is an alternative way, and it doesn't take away your drive or your grit or your resoluteness to achieve and to pursue your goals and so on. It's a false perception of people that if you take things lighter and you are more dispassionate and disengaged with the flow of events in your life, it means that you lost your touch, right? It means that you are not that driven anymore. Well, that's not correct. And there is a way to live a life that I call it, like an integrated life, like a life of whole life, like a whole life success, like success on all plans, both personal and professional, to live life in alignment with your values without compromising your grit, without compromising your drive, without losing anything, basically, by simply choosing not to force things, by choosing to just allow things to happen as they happen already. By the time you understand them, they're already there. Things happen always, um, you know with or without your direct contribution. Sometimes it feels that it's really my direct contribution that leads to that thing, and it's more obvious, of course, for small things, like I go and pick an object, and that object gets picked and raised from a table because I did it, right? But sometimes, when the relationship between us and a certain outcome is not direct and it's not immediate, or it's not easy to anticipate, then there are many other factors, that are many other variables that conclude to a certain outcome. So we have to work with the flow of events, right? We have to work with impediments occasionally. We have to work with things not happening exactly as we plan them, because if the project that you have, if the goal that you want to achieve is a complex one, or expected to last for months or years, of course, no plan, that you can make, no matter how good it is, will actually be executed ad literam, exactly how you planned it, and that's fine. So by simply trusting the process, you get to actually enjoy the journey, and embrace things as they come in a state of, I call it, active allowance, right? Things come as they come, and before you start to judge them, before you start to negotiate with reality, before you start to challenge the necessity of that thing happening, I personally try to just simply let it be first, by default. Because in a way, that event already manifested itself. That situation that I potentially don't like, or was not part of the script that I created in my mind, that thing is, however, still there. It's still happening. It happened actually by the time my mind reasons with it. So why fight it? Why challenge it? Why try to change it? Because it's not possible ultimately. So the state of active allowance allows me, right, to first let things be as they are. And this doesn't mean that I just abandon them and I don't care anymore. Okay, it didn't go according to my plan, so therefore I just don't care anymore. And no, that's actually still a state of rejection, because it would say that, okay, I don't like this, so I just drop it. I don't care about it anymore. I would still reject the outcome. I would still reject the situation. A state of active allowance allows me to work with the situation, allows me to make sense of that outcome that I didn't predict, and learn from it and understand why it happened. If I don't understand why it happened, if it's not intuitive or obvious why it happened, I assign a meaning to it based on my ability to reason with that outcome, right? I make sense of it according to my own beliefs, right? According to my own mindset. I own it. I adopt it. I say, this is happening for me. It's not what I expected, but I don't start to throw labels at it. I don't say, this is bad. This is unnecessary. This is hurting me. This is not what I need. And on and on and on. I don't engage, I don't fuel this negative thought pattern that ultimately becomes, if repeated, my default state of thinking. And it was for the biggest part of my life. And it was not really giving me good results ultimately. Yes, it made everything a bit more familiar because I anticipated the negative by default. And this is how human beings actually evolved and work, right? We anticipate the negative aspects because it's safer, it's more conducive to our survival, right? If I anticipate something bad to happen, then I can even prepare for it. I can see it exactly how it happens. And more often than not, even if it doesn't happen, I'm at least prepared, right? So I'm safe. And it feels good. But the problem is that this way of interacting with life and with reality robs you from the joy of living, which is such a pity, because in this life, we really have the opportunity to actually enjoy the things that we are living, instead of always, barricading us and, fearing everything that happens and thinking that everything, is harmful, and we live in a hostile universe, right? Like Einstein said, we have these two choices. We have to decide whether we believe we live in a friendly or a hostile universe. You will find infinite amount of reasons to believe that you live in a hostile universe. You can create a case for it. Clearly, your mind can help you with that, especially with that kind of framing, because the mind and the brain evolved in conditions of scarcity, and the brain is not, getting much, if you want, in terms of evolutionary probability, by just seeing things in a happy way and from a good lighting. However, again, it rubs at your joy of living, because you actually never get to really experience and give yourself the chance to be happy and fully okay with things as they already and always are, right? Things are always and already in a certain way. If if we have this mind state, right? If we have this set of associated beliefs, like, for example, I'm always unlucky, or bad things always happen to me, or I never get a good opportunity in my life. I'm never lucky. These things, if you just run them in your mind your whole life, they become the ways that you parse reality, right? They become a filter on top of how you perceive things to be. And that's normal, right? But there is an alternative way. You can start to decide and create this new set of beliefs which allow you to parse reality in a way that it's conducive to a fulfilling life. You can stay, instead of everything happens, everything bad happens to me, you can say everything happens for a reason, everything happens for me, everything happens so that I can evolve and learn something new. Everything happens because it has to happen in order for me to learn what I have to learn, so that I can pursue whatever goal I want, right? Or so that I can execute on my purpose, or so I can fulfill my mission on this earth, or whatever. And that's the interesting part of it, right? Because it doesn't matter what kind of beliefs you install, as long as they are chosen by you and they make sense for you, and they help you filter reality in a way that helps you, like really live a good life, then that's enough. And this is how I tend to live. Why wouldn't I? Once you see that this is an alternative way of living, it's just incredible. You claim responsibility on things that happen to you in your life. You want to be responsible for everything, because if it impacts you, it means that you're responsible for it. Even if it's not your doing, if it alters your state of mind, if it impacts you in any way, you should seek to take ownership of that outcome, because it clearly affects you. So if there is something that affects you, it means that you spend energy with it. It means that you should get something out of it. You should not just steal energy from you with nothing in return. If someone is nasty with you in traffic, and now you start to frame that event as something bad happening to you, and you start to blame that person, and then you start to think about that traffic event for the whole day, it would be such a waste. It would be like someone hacked really your mind, a stranger who maybe doesn't even care about you. They were just having fun, I don't know, and they hacked your mind, and they plant this seed, that you start to pour water and protect, it, and it developed into this kind of negative thought pattern and narrative, that it just, steals away your energy and puts you in this bad vibe, bad mood, bad state of mind, on top of which other similar events will inevitably happen, because this is how you are at that point, right? You expect things to happen in a negative way. And we all know how this works, right? You wake up in one morning, have like a bad mood, and you have like a small thing happening to you. Maybe you spill some coffee or whatever, and then things start to compound on themselves, right? By the end of the day, you just, it's like you can already anticipate by the way a day starts that it will be bad, right? It is, this is a bad day, and then you start to reinforce that thought. This is a bad day, this is a bad day. And then the day becomes bad simply because you expect it to be bad. Not necessarily that the day is bad in itself intrinsically. A lot of people in that very specific day, in other parts of the world, or maybe even in the same room with you at work, they will have the most amazing day. And it's not because they are luckier, or it's not because they are better people or whatever. It's not because God loves them more. It's just because that they see things in a different way. They don't occupy their minds with negative thoughts. They don't think about negativity all the time. They don't think that they are always wronged by other people, and the day started bad and so on. Even if you have a so-called bad thing happening to you, you don't have to fuel it. Just let it be. Just happens. You spill some coffee. That's fine. Just go over it. How could a spilled coffee hack your mind and make you think only about that thing the whole day? It's outrageous if you think about it, right? But we don't think about this kind of stuff. They just happen to us, and we just let them aggravate themselves, and we fuel them. We fuel the aggravation. We create something out of nothing, instead of just pulling the rug under the situation and see it as it is, just a happening, just an event, like anything else. I don't have to label it in a certain way. I don't have to attach it unnecessarily this kind of negative meaning. Just let it be. Let it be. Go on with your life. Choose to understand or learn something from it. Maybe next time you will pay a bit more attention in how you manipulate the coffee mug or whatever. Learn something from it. Be grateful for having the opportunity to have this situation and not something worse happening, right? You can choose the meaning of anything appearing negative to you. You can subjectively attach an interpretation to anything that happens in your life in a way that allows you to grow, in a way that allows you to learn something useful, right? And let's say that you learn, when it comes down to actually seeing things like that, I believe it's very important to have a goal in mind, because it's very difficult not to take events and outcomes at face value if you don't subjectively contextualize, if you don't have a proper framing around them. What do I mean by that? If you don't know where you are going in life, if you don't have a goal, if you don't pursue something meaningful to you, right? I call it a purposeful goal. Then it's very difficult to interpret apparently negative situations in your life, or obstacles or challenges, right? It's very difficult to interpret that in a positive way. Why? Because you don't have a reason to do it, right? You don't have anything to allow you to contextualize that negative situation in a positive way. If you have, however, a purposeful goal and you want to become a better version of yourself, for example, if you have like some sort of a personal transformation project, and you know that you have this vision, you know that you want to become that person, then you expect occasionally painful situations to happen, because growth is painful, evolution is painful. You expect things not to be as they typically are, because when you evolve towards a better version of yourself, that's the premise of disruption. You become someone else, you become someone better. So this disruption towards you becoming, the disruption caused by the fact that you decided to become a better version of yourself, it's expected, right? The negative so-called negative or painful situations are meant to be disruptive because you are meant to grow into a different human being ultimately. The process of transformation is occasionally uncomfortable and painful. But if you have this vision in mind of who you want to become and the life that you want to build for yourself, then everything so-called negative, every obstacle, every challenge that appears in your way is not a problem anymore, simply because it's on the path between the moment you decided to reach that destination, to become that person, to live that ideal life, and the moment when that happens. Everything in between is a mandatory stepping stone. It's an integral part of the journey. So rejecting it doesn't make sense anymore. Doesn't make sense. So this vision then allows you to contextualize or reframe a seemingly negative situation or a negative event or a negative outcome of your actions, seemingly negative, right? In a way that gives you confidence that this is actually exactly what you need. And I came up with this concept of extreme integration like about 1 year now, and it hit me like this is actually a good foundation for a life philosophy, right? Extreme integration means that everything that happens between the decision I take that I will achieve a certain goal and that goal being achieved, which is typically the you know the result of, I would say, the final transformation, right? The primary goal, it's a transformation in itself. I'm not interested in the tangible goal as such, but rather in the goal as reflective of a transformation process for me. So when I know that ultimately it's my decision to become this person, everything that happens up to that place, it's an integral part of my journey. So I cannot reject it. Doesn't make sense. So it means that if I cannot reject it, I have to embrace it. And I embrace it by default. And extreme integration is what happens with this active allowance, right? Or embracing by default of things. And this is where the mind comes with this subjective positive framing and meaning that I attribute to the event in a way that is conducive ultimately to my goal. Every single thing that happens to me, I decide now that because I live in a friendly universe, right? Because I have this kind of mind state, which is positive, forward looking, I decided to make it work for me. So whatever happens, happens for me, right? It's my responsibility to assign a positive meaning to each situation. So extreme integration means that you leave nothing behind. You discard nothing. You don't think that this is unnecessary. You don't think that, this event, delays me. No, it doesn't, right? Because again, a journey has a certain length. If the vision is high enough or complex enough, it means that the plan, I cannot create a plan with my mind that I can follow, each day in a certain way. There are elements that I cannot predict that can take me there. So it means that I always have to be available to adapting my plan and allowing things to happen in a way which is ultimately unpredictable. What I can do, however, is to allow everything to be as it is, to assign meaning to it, to learn from it, and actually enjoy the journey and actually get rewarded by the process of transformation. Because transformation ultimately never ends. And this outcome that I have in mind, this goal that I have in mind, is just one stage of transformation, right? Because we always transform as human beings. This never ends. So I'm just on this path of transformation with somewhat artificial goals that I establish along the way as milestones, just to validate a certain transition, right? And then once this is concluded, I just go on with my life and establish a new goal, which leads to a different kind of transformation, or something else, something new, something better. So I wanted to talk about this concept of mindset because I find it quite confusing if you don't deconstruct it, if you don't look beyond it. And again, for me, this is ultimately the mindset as such is ultimately the way, or rather a set of beliefs which give you a mind state, right? This set of beliefs allow you to filter reality in a way that is conducive to you living a fulfilling life, to enjoying the process, and to ultimately also achieving whatever goals you want in life. But in priority, honor the process, right? Don't discard things that happen to you, deem them as being beneficial to you, own everything, even if an outcome is not a direct implication of your decision. If it impacts you in any way, own it, learn from it. Because ultimately, this is, your experience, your life experience. Even if something is caused by another person, it's your energy, it's your life. You are affected by it in one way or another, so own it. Assign positive meaning to it. Look at it from different angles and understand how it can be beneficial to you. And it will be beneficial to you simply because you decided to be beneficial to you. It's that easy, all right? And I would say it's that simple. It's not easy because the mind has, unfortunately, this inertia, this momentum that is, programmed ultimately by evolution to think negatively, to expect bad outcomes, to live in anxiety, to fuel worrying thoughts. But this, with practice, can be turned around, and you can become more joyful, more accepting of life as it is. You will stop negotiating with everything. You will be in less conflict with life as such. And I think that's a beautiful thing. It is for me, at least. And I hope you can practice it and at least try to become aware of your tendencies first, right? This is the first step. Becoming aware of how your mind frames things by default. And you will see that it frames them in a familiar way, because this is how you used to frame everything, right? Again, so it becomes familiar, so you can make sense of it. But typically, if it doesn't serve you, if it's not producing you good results, then it means that the way the mind works is not helping you. So maybe it's time for a change. Maybe it's time to give yourself, um, a few weeks in which you can start to look at things from a different angle and see at least how interesting it can be to look at familiar things in ways that you never looked at. So I trust that you will find this exciting. I do. It's a good way to never get bored again, because you can always create narratives that serve you in ways, by the way, that don't have necessarily to make sense for a lot of people outside yourself, right? Maybe you can share something with your friends or family, but you are ultimately responsible for assigning positive meaning, subjective meaning, and interpretation to events in a way that makes sense to you. Because the worries that you have, the doubt, the anxiety, they are fueled by yourself still. Some people might resonate with how you think you see things in this negative way. But as you can make, worrying thoughts, you can also make good thoughts that will actually be more beneficial to you, both as a state of mind and as a way of living and being. So give it a try, and yeah, good luck. For me, this is a very, very enjoyable process. All the best.